Welcome to Hope in the Morning. I'm your host, Emily Curtis. When life takes a drastically different turn than we had hoped or prayed for, it can be heartbreaking. Psalm 27:13 states, I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Friends, as you listen to today's episode, my prayer for you is that you will be reminded of the unwavering goodness of the Lord throughout all circumstances in your life, and that your heart will find rest in that truth. Zoe, thank you for joining me today to share the hope that you have of Christ in you.
Thanks for having me.
So, right off the bat, what we're going to talk about is an issue that we know within the church can be somewhat controversial. And I think it's important that we talk about things that are non salvific, controversial topics in a non divisive, loving, humble way, where we can all learn something, we can have teachable spirits. Um, Today, one of those topics is IVF. And as I said, I know that that can be a controversial topic amongst Christians, partially because sometimes embryos are created and never used. So, Zoe, can you let us know what decision did you and your husband make once you guys had made the choice for IVF?
Right. We had really gone back and forth between do we adopt, do we do IVF, or do we just not have kids? And after not being told that there was any issue with my body, we really wanted to try IVF because that was the next step in our fertility journey. So we met with our pastors and we were just counseled that as long as we were going to be faithful to every embryo that we made and not to assume or make too many that we could not be accountable for, that we would use them all. So whatever that number was that we wrestled with, and we ended up saying, okay, we'll try to fertilize 7 eggs. And if all seven fertilize, that'd be crazy. We could have potentially 7 kids. We don't know what life would be like, but we also saw other people in the church that had 6 kids. We're like, we could be like them. We could do it.
Yeah.
And so we went with 7, and we knew that going into it that if all 7 fertilized became little souls, that we would be faithful to use them all to the best of our ability, and doing that at a time appropriate rate. So whatever that mapped out with my age, we would just know that I could be an older mom if all worked correctly. So we fertilized 7 and 6 made it to be fertilized. One didn't fertilize at all, so it never became an embryo. And then you wait 5 days and see if they continue to develop to be frozen. And we were counseled like with our doctor that like 20 to 30% would make it. So in our mind, the maximum would be 6 or 7, the 7 that we thought. But they kind of told us, oh, you probably get 20%. We're like, great. Well, if we got 2, we'd be thrilled to
Mm.
even have 2 chances. And then the 5 days went by and they said all 6 made it. And we're
Wow.
like, okay, we never thought that was going to be the answer. And so it's like, okay, we have 6 children that
Mm.
we haven't met yet, but we have 6, and the Lord created all 6. And so we have just chosen to be faithful to use all 6. So that's where it can be a little bit dicey, where people will make 20, 30 embryos and then
Yeah.
just they'll even test them to get the gender that they want. And we just
Mhm.
decided we're not going to test any of them. If they don't work, or if there's issues with them, or if they're all boys, all girls, that's what the Lord thought was best for us.
Yeah. I love that you had said if they became little souls, because that's what embryos are. And as believers, that is definitely what we believe. We believe that
Absolutely.
life begins at conception. And so that's why, as you'd mentioned, like that is why this can become controversial, is because people do create so many of them thinking, oh, I only have a 20 to 30% chance that they will survive. But that's not always the case, as you
Right.
saw. And so you had a much greater percentage that did survive. But also, I think for our listeners, it's important to remember what you had said, that they are little souls. And so, in that sense, a miscarriage is an absolute real loss. It's the loss of a unique child that has never been and will never be again created in the image of God. And so, as the church, we want to learn, how do we come alongside those families that have faced loss of a child in that sense and love them through it. Because I was thinking earlier today that the loss of a child it's the deep severance of a child that you've known and loved, but a miscarriage is the deep severance of a child that you loved but never got to know.
Right.
And as a church, we want to understand that it is still a very real grief. So after you had two successful IVF transfers, which resulted in two beautiful little boys, you had a third successful IVF transfer. Can you walk us through that pregnancy?
Yep. So we transferred our third in November of 2022, was successful. And it's funny, but I was just thinking today, what was I reading? Was that before this one that I was reading in Psalm 16 because we had a women's conference and it was just about the lines have fallen and the places for me so that, nothing is a surprise to the Lord. So I kind of went into that pregnancy with that just being holding an open hand, thinking, wow, if we're
Yeah.
successful 3 times in a row, that would still be beating a lot of odds in the IVF world. And so we became pregnant. Everything seemed normal. We found out the gender at 14 weeks. We did a private ultrasound because there's not a lot of surprises with IVF, and so we wanted to find out with our family. So we took both of our sets of grandparents with us and found out, my parents and my husband's parents, and found out it was another little boy. And then we actually went to Texas for 3 weeks for my husband's work, and just me and it was just like our family for 3 weeks with really no distractions. And while we were there, I had a at-home Doppler and I tried to listen for the heartbeat just because I was like, "Oh, it's kind of fun."
Yeah.
I had felt him kick like 2 days before. I was like around 17 weeks. Um, and I couldn't find the heartbeat, but I didn't really freak out because I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I had just felt him kick a day or two before, so I didn't think much of it. I ended up finding the placenta heartbeat, and so I thought,
Mhm.
or that, and so I thought I found it. And then we got home from our trip from Texas, and I went in for my 19-week ultrasound, or not ultrasound, just appointment. And our doctor couldn't find the heartbeat. And right away, I had told her before, I said, something just felt a little off. I felt him kick 2 weeks ago, but I hadn't felt him kick again. Maybe my placenta's in front. But I'm very aware with my body just going through the IVF process. You feel everything.
Mm.
Um, and so she found the Doppler or did the Doppler and couldn't find it. She goes, let's just do an ultrasound. And at that moment, I was alone. And I was like, something's wrong. Like
Mm.
I knew that he was probably gone. And then
Yeah.
she put him up on the ultrasound screen, and the baby I saw at 14 weeks, who was very wild, was just still.
Mm.
And I called my husband right away. I said, you need to come. And he came like right away. Of course, he didn't know anything. And I just remember looking at my doctor and she goes, I am so sorry. I'm like, it is really okay. Like, I just had this piece of like, he's not
Mm.
here. He's with the Lord. Like, I never thought it would happen, but this is what happened and he's not here. So I have hope. And she just kept saying, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it is sad, but I really am okay. And so my husband showed up. We called our family while we waited in the waiting room or in a private room to figure out. Obviously, I was 19 weeks, so the baby was bigger, but based on his measurements, he was around 17 weeks. So the day that I felt him kick, which I know I did, I think he probably would have died the next day,
Mm.
right around there. So I'm like, it's a grace that I even got to feel him once. I'm very thankful for
Yeah.
that. Um, and because of how far along I was, I needed to have a D&E, not just a DNC. So my doctor didn't wasn't able to perform that, and I didn't know of any other doctors. So, and I didn't realize at the time that he was going to send me to an abortion clinic to have
Mm.
this done because of how far along I was. He had just said I was going to go to a women's clinic, and I was like, great, I'll probably go as soon as I can because I don't want a dead baby in my belly. And
Yeah.
knowing that he had been dead for 2 weeks, I didn't want to go into labor because I've had two C-sections. So there was just a lot of complications
Mhm.
potentially that I was thinking through. Like, we have our other embryos to be faithful. So let's be faithful in this process to make sure my body is okay to
Mm.
hopefully transfer again.
Yeah.
So I went home and we called the place and I realized at that time that it was an abortion clinic. And they said, well, we can get you in next week. And I said, listen, I am an IVF patient who desperately wanted a baby and I want to be seen right away to get this fixed. And so they had me come in the next day. Um, and when I walked in, I had my purse and my water bottle, and there was a security guard. And he was like, you can't take any of that in. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't even take my water bottle. And he said,
Wow.
no, you can't, just your phone. And I was like, okay. So I went
Mm.
back out and my husband Parker, I was like, you may as well go to work. Like, there's nothing for you to do, and you're not just gonna sit in an abortion clinic parking lot waiting for me. And we
Yeah.
thought it was just gonna they usually have 2 appointments. So one appointment to be seen and the next appointment to have the procedure done. So I thought I was just being seen to get the appointment set. And when I went in there, it was really sweet because there was one nurse who came up and she gave me a big hug right away and she was like, "I'm the one who I talked to you on the phone yesterday and I am so sorry." Just
Aw.
a lot of compassion. And she took me back and she goes, "We're gonna try to get this done today." So I was there at 8 a.m. and sitting in the waiting room and probably saw 30 to 50 ladies come in and
Mm,
out, all ranges of ages, high school to older than me. Um, and then I asked them to do another ultrasound to make sure, which they wouldn't show me, but it definitely looked different. Just they showed me a picture and he was definitely in demise of,
mm,
he's been gone for 2 weeks. So I was thankful that they got me in to do that. So I only had my phone. So I'm sitting there thinking, what am I gonna do? Like, I
mm.
don't have my husband. I'm sitting in a waiting room with a bunch of ladies who seem totally fine, who knows how far along they all are, and I'm sitting there just weeping. But
Yeah.
I just was amazed at how much scripture came to mind that I didn't know I knew, and songs that I didn't know I knew, because that's the only thing I could cling to was the Lord was the only one that was physically with me.
Mm,
Um, so it was just a comfort. And I had the thought the night before when I knew I was going there. I'm like, you know what? The Lord has me there for a reason. So I'm going to just evangelize as much as I can.
mm,
Whatever that looks like. If I can even talk to one lady, I'd be thrilled. And there was one lady named Tiffany that I remember sitting next to, and I asked her, I said, "Do you have other children?" She goes, "Yeah, I have two at home, and I don't really want this one. And my husband really does." And I was just like, well, having more than one or two children is such a blessing. I have two at home and I would love to have another one. And
mm,
I don't know what happened with her, but I just remember sitting there praying for each woman that I sat next to.
mm,
Um, and so the staff was really gracious. They were really kind. There was actually one lady that said that she had lost twins through IVF and had a very similar situation to me, which
mm.
was a nurse, and she just was really kind and compassionate. Um, so even though it was super hard, the Lord really gave me a lot of comfort that day,
Mm,
as we walked through that. And then, so I was there all day. My husband didn't know what was going on because I took my phone when I went back for the procedure, and then there were some complications. And finally, he's like calling them, is she okay?" And everything worked out just fine. But very thankful that it all did because we were able to move forward in other transfers. But very, very hard to think about
yeah,
all that
yeah.
went on.
For those that are listening, you can actually read Zoe's story on hopeinthemorning.org as well. If you go into our stories section, her story is down there on page 2. And one of the things that you say in there, Zoe, is that in that abortion clinic, that you were determined to be a light for Christ in the midst of darkness. And that's what we want to be. That's what we want to be amidst all of our sufferings and our sorrows, is that we can be a light for Christ, saying, just like you did in that ultrasound room, it's gonna be okay. I know that Jesus holds my baby. And, another book resource real quick before we go to break that I want people to know about is Safe in the Arms of God by John MacArthur, because that does give so much peace when you know that your little one never suffered the sorrows of this world, that they went straight to the arms of Jesus. And there's an aspect of that that is a severe mercy, really, because as much as it's a heartbreak to us mothers when we lose those babies, we know where they are. They are secured in heaven for us. So when we come back, we're going to talk about some practical ways that the church can serve families that face miscarriage and how we can be ministers and lights amidst other people's darkness. Join us again in just a moment on Hope in the Morning. Welcome back to Hope in the Morning. My guest today, Zoe, found herself at an abortion clinic for a very different reason than the other mamas that were there. And it was because her little baby boy had passed away in her womb, and she went to deliver him because of COVID. She had to go by herself. And yet the Lord was near. You didn't have your husband by your side, but you had the Lord. And the Lord was there bringing you comfort. And not only that, but laying on your heart to be praying for these other women, which I think is so beautiful. And, Habakkuk 2:3 tells us that there will come a time when your tears will fall, not because of your troubles, but because God has answered your prayers. And so at this point, you had 6 embryos that you guys had frozen. You have used 3 of them, resulting in 3 precious little boys, 1 in the arms of Jesus and 2 in your arms. Can you walk us through a little bit of that subsequent pregnancy? Because I do wanna say here real quick that I think that those that haven't experienced miscarriage, they might not understand the amount of anxiety that can accompany a subsequent pregnancy. So
Yep.
can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know if it was like this for you, but after we lost Colt, it was like, oh, you're hoping that you're gonna have a baby. So the instant I want another one right away
Mhm,
is real. And then the thought of, well, will I ever be able to have another one?
mhm,
That's not promised. Like even our embryos were never promised to us. And so we had to wait 3 months to just make sure my body was fine. And we reached out to our IVF doctor, and he was very, very compassionate. He actually called me and was like, I just heard, I'm so sorry. And I
mhm,
said, that's very, very kind. We would love to transfer again. So what's the soonest we can do that? And so he made us wait 3 months. And then in July of 2023, so it was beginning of July 5th, we transferred our 4th embryo, and it worked again, which is just amazing to think 4 for
yeah,
4 is not normal. And again, it was another little boy, but there was a lot of fear, especially going into my 17, 18, 19 week appointment. Um,
mhm,
just knowing what had gone on. But right when I walked into my 17-week appointment, my doctor, he was like, all right, we're doing the Doppler. I know what week it is. And right away, he's like,
mhm.
okay, we're just going to take a breath and now we can do the normal appointment. So he just
Aw,
was super compassionate. They had me see high risk doctors just to make sure that there was nothing that we didn't know could affect this baby. And everything came out fine. And then based on my due date, I would have been due like middle of March of 2024, and I have gone 3 weeks early because of high blood pressure and preeclampsia with a scheduled C-section. So my due date ended up being, or I ended up having the baby on March 1st. So it's just
mm,
amazing that a year later, not even a year later, I had a baby in my arms. And
yeah,
then a week after that was, Colt's, what we call him, his death day, because that's when we found out. So it's just the kindness of the Lord, but definitely a lot of anxiety to think, oh, I don't feel sick today. Oh, I do feel
yeah,
sick. I don't feel movement. I do. It's
yeah.
it's just a
Did you
lot to
do
work through.
did you do any of the, like, where you would take pregnancy tests and monitor if the line was getting darker? Was that something that
That's
you
kind of what you do in IVF to
mm,
start with.
okay,
You usually find out pretty quick. You can. Some people don't like to test right away, but you can know within 3 or 4 days of doing a transfer if it worked or not. And that's just the
yeah,
reality. It's like within 2 days of after doing the transfer, the baby is either alive and implanted or it's gone.
mm,
So it's a lot of knowledge that maybe you don't want to have, but you do have, and so you have to be
yeah,
really careful with it.
yeah. I my experience was similar to yours. I think that that's something that I hope that women that are listening who have gone through miscarriages or maybe they're in kind of that rainbow baby pregnancy right now, and for those that don't know what a rainbow baby is, it's a baby that is born after a loss, and maybe they are struggling with those anxieties. And I just wanna encourage you, if you are in that season, give that to the Lord. Every time that you go into those ultrasounds or those doctor's appointments, just pray, "Lord, please settle my heart. Give me the peace that passes understanding." Remind yourself, just like Zoe, just like you said with Colt, remind yourself that God is still gonna be good, even if the baby doesn't have a heartbeat that day. He will sustain you. It's gonna hurt. It will. But he will sustain you. He will be good. He will be faithful to you, and we can trust him. And I think there comes a point where we just have to realize that, and I think you had mentioned this earlier too, Zoe, is that we have to have those open hands. And that can be a very hard thing in pregnancy. Sometimes I think we don't even realize how tightly our fists are clenched around that little baby because we love that baby immediately. And you don't realize until the Lord is demanding, "Open your hands. This baby doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me." And it's a gift. It's a good gift. James tells us that every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights, and he has no shifting shadow. His character does not change just because our circumstances do. So, asking you, just in a practical sense, what are some ways that the church can serve families that have gone through a miscarriage and the loss of a baby in that regard?
The very practical ones are meals. I mean, just physically as I was recovering and even just emotionally, every day was different. It
Mhm.
was really helpful just to have I had a lot of friends just drop off meals, whether it was lunch or dinner. And my kids were little, still 3 and like 1.5, so they didn't know what was going on, and I mean, a little bit, but not a lot. So that was just a practical thing. I know it was just my mom, but she came over a lot just to sit, and it was like I just cried, and either
Mhm.
it was her taking the kids outside, but I felt like that was helpful for me because 'cause I'm like, it's hard to know when the grief's gonna hit.
Right.
Sometimes it's random. There's times where it was in church when you're singing a song and you're like, "Why am I
Mhm.
bawling my eyes out right now? I don't wanna be doing this."
Yeah.
Um, so just practical to help out with if there are older kids to give the mom some time alone to even process.
Mhm.
Remember I had a full day to myself where I was like, "Okay, I need to sit here and just and think, like, actually
Mhm.
process and think about it," because it's easy just to not want to think about it, and that was helpful for me personally. We had we so with abortion in clinic, we had to pay out of pocket.
Mm.
They don't take insurance, and so they had told us it was gonna be like $1,700 to have the procedure done because the baby had measured at 17 weeks. And for us, it's like that's an unexpected expense. And so they ended up coming down on the price, but all of my friends, we had a tight group of friends that knew what was going on, and they gave it ended up being like $900, and they gave us $900 cash to cover
Mm.
what had happened. And so that was just a blessing. So you don't really think about maybe the medical expenses that go into losing a baby, whether it's
Yeah.
hospital because you're having a DNC or however it ends up happening, there are medical expenses. So that was just a huge blessing that we never thought would happen. That same group also gave us a little gift basket of some books and devotionals and even a gift card to go on a date night and then free babysitting. So it was just really thoughtful of time for my husband and I to have together, to get away a little bit.
Yeah, I think that is a good point that people again, if you haven't walked through a miscarriage personally, I think it's hard to understand that if you're past about 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks, if you're past that point, there are going to be medical expenses associated with your miscarriage, and they can be pretty high. And honestly, that ends up being sort of a insult to injury. You know what I mean? Because here you're getting these medical bills, but every medical bill is a reminder of the baby that you so wanted. You know, you so had prepared room in your heart and your family for, and yet that's not what the Lord had ordained for your life. And um, another thing for those again that are going through this, that maybe you're in the midst of a miscarriage right now. God God will be good. He will see your weeping. It's okay to bring that before the Lord. It's okay to cry over that baby. It's okay to mourn that child. Um, I think for generations, for whatever reason, miscarriages were kind of a hush hush thing. It was something that was not really spoken about. We've learned that more in our generation that it that more women had miscarriages than we realized.
Mhm.
And it's something that when we can come alongside other women and we can say, "I've been through that as well." Um, Even for me, like, one of the things that was helpful was the night before I had my DNC was having other people who had gone through it actually message me and say, "Here's what you can expect," because you don't know what to expect, and you really you can't Google a whole lot, and even if you do, everything you're gonna Google is going to show up, like, as an abortion practice, which just
Yep.
it's gut-wrenching when you so want this baby, and like you had said in your written story, Satan, he is a deceiver, he is the father of all lies, and he wants to whisper things to our minds and our hearts, and, even having that ultrasound that you had, that final ultrasound that you had before they did deliver Colt, through a D&E, there's a reassurance in that because you can know, okay, he really is with the Lord. I am not causing his demise, he's with the Lord. The Lord chose the length of his days. Um, what would you say, we talked about some of the practical ways to minister to people that have gone through miscarriage and the loss of a baby in that way. What would you say is the most painful reaction in the face of that loss?
I think that there's a few. There's some friends that would be like, "Well, you can just have another one," or maybe you need to wait. You need to give your body time, and it's like that's not what I want.
Mhm.
Um, or they don't talk about it. I think that's probably the most hurtful, is where they would not acknowledge. I remember we had some friends over and it was like they never said one word to us. And it was
Mm,
like it had been a few weeks. And it's like, are you even acknowledging what we're going through? I love that you're here, but you also are like not in it with us.
yeah,
And there are definitely some ladies who would prefer not to talk about it. So I think that's kind of what I've learned is some ladies like to talk about it and they like to, it helps them, but there are some that don't, that would rather
mhm,
keep it more private, and that's totally okay too. So I think even just asking the question, do you want to talk about it? Where
yeah,
I'm happy to talk about it. Or if you don't, we don't have to, but just know that I am here if you do want to talk.
yeah. I completely agree with you, and I think for our listeners, that's something it's good for us to get uncomfortable sometimes, to actually enter someone else's grief and to say, just as simply as you just said, Zoe, to say, "I'm here if you wanna talk about it. Do you wanna tell me about your story? Do you wanna tell me where you're at with your grief right now?" Or saying, "How can I pray for you?" And one of the most comforting things I think that we can do as believers is not just saying, "How can I pray for you?" but actually, like, call them or go over to their house, bring a coffee, bring a meal to them and say, "Can I pray with you? Can I
Mm,
pray for you right now?" And so often we mean well when we say, "I'll be praying for you," but then we don't, right? In the busyness of our lives, we go off and we don't. But what a beautiful thing when we can carry someone else's burdens to the throne of Christ. And that is what we are instructed to do. We're instructed to sit with each other in the ashes, to bring each other's petitions before the Lord. That's what selfless love looks like. You know, and
mhm,
in John, it tells us that we will be known that we are his disciples by the way that we love one another. And that's one of the ways that we can love each other. And even going back to what we had said at the beginning is that each one of those embryos or every baby, every life that God creates is a soul. It is a unique human life. It is a baby. It just is at different developmental stages. And so
mhm.
we need to mourn with one another as if they lost a child because you did lose a child, and that's a very heartbreaking loss to go through, and yet it can be very isolating because they didn't actually meet that baby and hold that baby, I think they tend to feel more disconnected from it, and um, for those of you that are listening to the radio broadcast, I would encourage you to tune in on Tuesday. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can listen to us, or you can go to Hope in the Morning Backstage on YouTube. Click and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. But we're going to continue this conversation. And I want to conclude the radio portion of this with something that I saw in your story, Zoe. It was one of your favorite passages, and it's one of mine too, and I think any mom who is going through or has gone through a miscarriage will just see the tenderness of these words, and it's in Psalm 139, and it says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you." I think that's such a beautiful passage that can be a reminder to those of us that have babies in the arms of God. So when we come back on our podcast, we're going to talk about some ways that you can honor your miscarried babies and just a few more ways that we can love on those that are traveling through that hard season. So thank you for joining us today on Hope in the Morning. So Zoe, what are some things, if anything, that you guys do each year to remember and honor Colt?
Honestly, we've just talked to our kids more about it. As they're getting older too. It's funny how my middle child doesn't remember anything. I mean, he was too little. He's like,
Mhm.
who is that? But it is a great opportunity to share. Well, no, you do have another brother, and so we've just talked about him more as the time comes. We haven't ever done anything in particular for him, but I think that's just more of where we're at with it.
Yeah. Did you and your husband grieve the loss of Colt differently?
Yeah, we did. I remember I was very, very emotional, and I remember saying, "Well, you just don't understand." And he's
Mhm.
like, "Actually, that's not true. If anything, I understand the most with
Mm.
you." And so that was a helpful for me is that men do grieve differently. Maybe
Yeah.
he wasn't as emotional as me, but he definitely was grieving and trying to figure out how to help me, practically and just spiritually walking me through it. So it grew him in a lot of ways, just as a
Yeah.
leader in our home.
Did your husband have any friends or any men in the church that came alongside him in that season?
Yeah, we definitely reached out to a lot of different couples that had walked through things with us. And so he had met with a few of them and even just asking like, I don't really know how to help her.
Yeah.
So that was helpful of just giving me time and asking me about it. Because it's easy to not talk about it sometimes, but we
Mhm.
really tried to go against that grain and talk about what the thoughts were and even thinking through the next steps of a next baby and getting on the same page of that because it was a real topic of conversation after the loss.
Yeah. I think for the men that are listening, and actually we have a pretty decent amount of men that listen to our show, which is wonderful because it's the men that lead the families through the grief. And just as you had mentioned, your husband was grieving too, just grieving in a different way. And so it's important that men remember to come alongside other men too, whether it is, the loss of a wife or the loss of a child, the loss of a job, the loss of good health. It's really important that they come alongside and offer strength so that that man can go forward and be renewed and be the strength in his family as well. And strength does not look like what we think from a society standpoint. Strength can be tears. As far as men go, it can strength is hugging your wife when she's having a hard moment and saying, "I'm going to sit with you in your grief, even though I may not be feeling that at this moment." But
Mhm.
that's what it looks like to be the body of Christ, is to love one another, to set our own agendas aside, whether that is that we are the friend or the spouse. We wanna set our own agenda aside and love each other well. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why Hope in the Morning exists is because we want to learn how do we love each other intentionally and how do we love each other effectively. And that's why it's important to talk about some of the things like you shared today, Zoe, about what what is actually hurtful. Because some,
Mhm.
some people might think, "Oh, I'm not gonna say anything because I might say the wrong thing. And if I say something wrong, then I'm gonna really hurt her feelings."
Right.
Or I'm not gonna say his name because then that's gonna make her sad. And but for most people that have lost a loved one, saying their name is actually kind of a unique gift because it
Right.
acknowledges that they existed and that they
Mhm.
had value, And so I think in those instances, if we can with humility and grace, come alongside and say, when this was said, this was not helpful. This was hurtful. That's something that can actually edify the church and build us up so that we are a stronger unit together.
I will
So,
say I had two friends reach out after, and what was helpful is they asked about future kids. And
oh,
it just acknowledged, like, one in particular was like, "How are you thinking through your other embryos? Like, do you feel nervous about doing that? Do you feel
mhm,
excited? Like, do you have a timeline?" And it was pretty soon after our miscarriage, but it was like, "Thank you for acknowledging that we do have other embryos waiting for us to use them." And
mhm,
it's not just this hidden thing. And we've been very open about our IVF situation with all of our friends, but just to acknowledge that there is a desire for other children was helpful
yeah,
because it's a real thing that you're trying to process. Like, I'm sad that I lost a baby, but I want another baby, and it's okay to want another baby. It
yeah,
doesn't minimize that he's gone.
right.
Just the torn feelings that it's okay to process and think about the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and your 4th son, which you did end up going forward and having a 4th son, does
Mhm.
not he doesn't replace Colt, but
Mhm.
what a blessing from the Lord to yet again open your womb and allow you to have a son. Again, and as you said, it's so rare in the IVF community to have 4 consecutive successful transfers.
Right.
And one of the things too I wanna plug in real quick, because some people might not know this, we had talked about how IVF can be controversial, and you had mentioned that sometimes people will fertilize and create 20, 30 embryos, But for those of you listening that may not know, you can actually adopt embryos. You can
Mm.
actually adopt a baby in that way, and you can be pregnant with that child. And so for believers out there that maybe you are having struggles with creating your own biological family and you're thinking, I would love to be pregnant. I would love to experience all of that, but the Lord is not allowing that in a natural way right now. And maybe we're called to adoption. Maybe you're called to adopt an embryo. That's an option. That is something that I think a lot of people don't know about, but it's a very viable option. Um, so with that, knowing that you had, um, I guess it was what two other three had three at that point. When you lost Colt, you had three
Yeah,
embryos left,
agree.
and so you had another one that was transferred, and you had another beautiful little boy with that. And we talked about some of your anxious thoughts that you had. How did you combat some of those? And how can we encourage other people going through that subsequent pregnancy?
We just decided from a very early stage of IVF, even with our first child, when we got that first positive test, which we had never seen before, that we were just going to rejoice because that's all we knew, is that
Mhm,
there was a life inside of me. And we would do that until we knew that there wasn't.
mm,
And so we've kind of gone forward with that with each pregnancy. Is just we're going to take it day by day, and today we know that there's a baby, and we're going to rejoice. And if tomorrow we know that there's not, then the Lord knew that that was best. So just trying to remind myself every day is that's why we share very early of we're pregnant. We've had out extra early with IVF, so it's like there's no surprise in it, but we just try to rejoice every day. And so just being really, I had to be really prayerful because it was very
mhm,
easy to let my mind go. And even being open with my husband of like, today is really hard for me. And,
mhm.
then he was able to come alongside and ask questions of like, what made it hard? How can I pray for you? Let's pray together right now. Um, and just being thoughtful about it and being open about the struggles instead of internally trying to just hide it, and that would just make it
Yeah,
a lot worse.
yeah. Telling people early, we know not everyone wants to do that. Not everybody is comfortable doing that. But there is I would say that there's a wisdom in that because you don't know. We're not guaranteed, as you had mentioned, we are not guaranteed that those lives are going to come into our hands. We don't know that. We don't know if they are going to be born into the arms of Jesus or that we are going to get to love and nurture them here on earth. But when you go through a miscarriage, you need people to come alongside you. It actually does lessen the sting to have people that come alongside you that can come help shoulder your burden. And so when you've kept that to yourself and the first time that you're telling people is when you're announcing a loss, I think it's harder for people to connect with you in that loss when the first time they're learning of this pregnancy is after the loss. But if they can
Yeah.
rejoice with you in the beginning, when you first, get that positive test, I think that it is more natural for them to mourn with you when that baby does not come to be held in your arms.
Yeah.
Um, what were some of the books or resources that encouraged you during that time?
So I listened to like the week after we had the procedure. I actually listened to the Risen Motherhood. They had
Mm,
just put out a thing on miscarriage because I was kind of like, I feel like I'm the only one, even though I had a friend who had had many, and she was the one who sent it to me. She goes, like, whenever you feel like you can listen to it, listen to it. But I'm like, well, I got nothing else to do right now, so I may as well listen to it and figure out why this happened, which
yeah.
you still don't know, but that was one resource that was super helpful. And then another one that I through that podcast was the book Held by Abby Wedgeworth. And
Mm,
so I got it, and it was hard to read here and there because there's just stories that are sad in it, but through it, just walking through Psalm 139, and I know Psalm 139 is easy to think about, just the baby inside of you, but I felt like for me personally, it was, how does the Lord think about me? And He
mm,
knows every feeling that I'm feeling, every emotion that I'm feeling, and it's by no mistake, and it's going to make me more like Him.
yeah.
And so that was just a really big blessing to me. So now, whenever I do hear of people that have miscarriages throughout the church, I usually send it to them, and if they already have it, or if they don't have it, just because I'm like, this really helped me. Read it when you can, because it can. Some people don't want to read it right away, and it's hard, or maybe it will really help you, but it just helped me. know that I wasn't alone, and it is very common.
Yeah, yeah. I actually have a copy of it here, so I'm gonna show it for those that are watching on YouTube just so you can see if I can get it straight. So you can see what that book is. It's called Held, and it's got actually, like, journaling prompts and everything in it too, and so it says it's 31 biblical reflections on God's comfort and care in the sorrow
Mhm.
of miscarriage, and it's not a big read, it's a nice, like, it feels digestible. It doesn't feel like it's going to be, um, overwhelming or heavy in that time. Um, I believe that this was something that we were gifted as well, and another thing that I think is a great gift, I don't know if this was something that you utilized or if it helped you, but when we had ours, the one that was farthest along, someone sent us, like, a really nice, heating pad
Mhm.
and a box of really nice tea, and you would think like, "Oh, I wouldn't think to send a heating pad," but
Yeah.
you have to heal from a DNE or a
Right.
DNC as well, and it was such a thoughtful gift, and even to this day, it's like every time that I drink that tea, I think about what a loving gift for somebody to send, and I think, you know, doing gifts like that, and then along with that book that you'd recommend, Held, that's a great gift that you can send to somebody and just show them, like, "You're on my mind, you're on my heart, and you're in my prayers," and,
Yeah.
um, so you're saying that that's something that you send now when you hear that somebody has gone through a miscarriage. Do you find that now that you've been through one, that you minister differently to other women when you find out they're going through one?
Yeah, I feel like before I mean, I never thought that I would have one, and I didn't really
Mhm.
know how to talk to him or even what was helpful, what unhelpful. And I had a
Mhm.
friend who had a very traumatic miscarriage, and came back to her after we lost Colt and just was like, I am really sorry that I was not a better friend because
Mhm.
I didn't know how to help you. And I know we don't live in the same state, but I never even followed up very well. So it just was
Yeah.
helpful for me to be like, here, there is something unique about going through a miscarriage because you really don't know until you've been in it of just
Mhm.
how hard it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it definitely has helped me just have more of a compassion. Like you get it. I had multiple friends like right around the time that I lost Colt also lose their babies, and so we kind of walked through that together, um, which was hard, but also very sweet to know we all get it. We get the emotions, we get physically what you're going through.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I think that's great, and I think that that's a way that we can comfort others with the comfort by which we've been comforted. Whether it is sharing with them the scriptures that helped you or the practical things of saying, "Oh, if you're going in for a DNE, this is what you need to prepare for, or this is what you can expect afterwards." That is such a loving thing to come alongside people in that because it's a very vulnerable time when
Yeah.
you're going through those things and you don't have control, and I think as mamas, we need to remind ourselves that, like, we don't ever have control, right? In a whether it's in a healthy pregnancy or a miscarriage or the children that God has entrusted to our care here earthside, we do not have control over them. As Psalm 139 said, "Their days are numbered and ordained by God," every one of them, and it's so easy as moms to cling to those things and feel like we have to do everything just right. Or sometimes, unfortunately, when we go through miscarriages, again, I think that lies are whispered to our minds of what did we do wrong? What did I do that could cause this? And I think
Mhm.
it's not uncommon for us women to think, what did I eat in those weeks? What exercise did I do? Was I around, would I have inhaled any chemicals? Like what caused this? Like that's what we want the answers. And
Yep.
sometimes God says, you know what? I'm gonna prepare you for these trials, but I'm not going to take them from you. And you had said even at the conference that you were at before where you heard Psalm 16, and the Lord used that to help
Mhm.
prepare your heart, and he does that so often because
Yeah.
the trials are often what make us more Christ-like. It allows us to see his character in a way that we can't see it in the good times. Scripture talks about how it's more beneficial to be in a house of mourning than in a house of dancing, and part of that is because oftentimes we are brought to our knees before the Lord so much more often when we're in a season of suffering,
Right.
and that's where we should be at all times, but the reality is in our humanity, we're not. When things are going really well, we feel like we've got it.
Right.
But it's like when we can acknowledge, when we go through those seasons where we're forced to acknowledge that we don't have control, it leads us to the one that we know does have control.
Yep.
So, Zoe, as we wrap up here, I would just kinda love to know what your hopes are for your future, for the little boys that the Lord has entrusted to you, um, for Colt's testimony that you get to be a steward of. What are your hopes?
I was just thinking, his death has brought a lot of conversations with my now 5.5-year-old where we've talked about it more, but I've told him many times, well, I know that I will get to meet your brother Colt. Like I have assurance. I know. And recently he goes, well, how do you know that? Like why do you know that you're saved? So it's just I remember one of my friends was like, you never know how your baby's death will impact your other kids and how that they could even be saved because of it. And watching you guys walk through the trial. So I hope that we are really faithful in bringing that up to them and just, showing that we know that he's in heaven. We have hope and we believe the Bible and we have assurance that we're saved. So we will get to meet him and we pray that you will too. And
Mm,
so that's, the hope is we're planting those little seeds in their hearts that they can someday have assurance that they will get to meet their brother as well. As far as our future plans, we're preparing for our next transfer to be faithful to our next little embryo, and we have two left. So just trying to be faithful in that. It's a hard place to be in. Where right now, just knowing we've gone 4 for 4, that's
mhm,
uncommon. And so we don't want to just presume it's going to work again. But in my mind, it's easy to be like, well, it's not going to work because it's already worked 4 times.
mm,
And so it's just holding that hand open and saying, Lord, whatever you have is best for us. So whether that means we don't get to meet any more of the embryos, even if, we transfer them and they don't work, or we
mm.
get to meet both of them.
Yeah,
So just trying to hold an open palm and being faithful going forward, because that's what we're called to do. And also just keep remembering that the Lord made all six with knowing that we would not meet Colt for sure. And we don't know about the other two yet, but he makes no mistakes. And
yeah,
so we're just called to be faithful.
yeah. Well, when I read your written story, which again, for those of you that are watching this or listening on the podcast, you can go to hopeinthemorning.org and you can see if you tap on what we do down below that is, I think it's entitled stories or readers' stories. And you can find her story on page 2. And it's the same title as this, which is Surrender in the Stillness. But the reason why we titled it Surrender in the Stillness, Zoe, is because you you portray so beautifully in your written story, and I think here in your interview as well, that you desire to have those open hands, that you desire to surrender everything that the Lord has entrusted to you, whether it's the children that you have here or the stillness of there being no heartbeat, and you being able to turn to the Lord and say, "It's okay. I can surrender this to you." And that's not an easy thing. It's not something that just because we are Christians that it's going to come naturally all the time. It doesn't come naturally all the time, and that's something that we all want to grow in, and I think that your story is so beautiful. I would really encourage everybody to go and read your full story, because this is just a little sampling of your story really that you wrote, and I love that you say you don't know what the Lord has for those other babies, but you know that the Lord has given you 6 babies,
Mhm.
and some of them may be in the arms of Jesus and some in your arms, but each one is a gift. And so I so appreciate you being willing to not only share your story so vulnerably today, but being willing to use it as a testimony that can encourage the church, but also equip those that are listening that have never walked through a miscarriage or who may never walk through a miscarriage so that they can know more readily how to be the hands and feet of Jesus to those within the church or even outside the church. How do
Mhm.
we minister? How do we minister in a way that says we're his, we belong to him, and we love you? And so I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing Colt's story. And again, I would encourage all of you guys to go read her story on hopeinthemorning.org. Zoe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.